we're joined by John Gillespie, the founder and CEO of Wine Opinions, one of the most respected voices in U.S. wine market research. John and his team recently released new research that dives deep into how 21 to 39-year-old beverage alcohol consumers perceive and are engaging with wine today in the United States. And our three key takeaways and what we're really going to focus on are: number one, what are the biggest barriers in the wine industry for younger consumers? Number two, how can wine better appeal to younger audiences? And finally, number three, how can wineries utilize the great insights and information that you gather from your surveys into actionable next steps for their business? Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market with me, your host, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the U.S. market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests in every episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned from the episode. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us this week to learn more about the U.S. market. Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market. Today on the Italian Wine Podcast, we're joined by John Gillespie, the founder and CEO of Wine Opinions, one of the most respected voices in US wine market research. With decades of experience gathering insights from both consumers and the trade, John and his team recently released new research that dives deep into how 21 to 39-year-old beverage alcohol consumers perceive and are engaging with wine today in the United States. Spoiler alert, it's not all rosy. So we'll unpack the biggest findings and what they mean for the future of the wine industry on today's episode with John. John, thank you so much for joining us today in the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
So before we dive into the data and the survey, which we're excited to learn more about, tell us a little bit more about how you found yourself in this world of wine market research.
Well, when I finished graduate school, I went to New York City looking for a job in publishing. And as it so happened, a couple of weeks after I got to New York, there was an opening for an editor at a wine magazine. And I was lucky enough to get that position and found myself in the wine business without really trying. I was really more interested in editing.
Wow.
And that opened a lot of doors for me in the wine business. And after a little while, maybe a year or so, I moved over into public relations in New York and worked for an agency that ran the promotional campaigns in the U.S. for the French government, for both for Bordeaux as a wine region and also for the wines of France in general. And I did that for a number of years before heading to California, where I worked for a company that owned 4 wineries in California, doing communications and public relations work. After that company was sold, which was a number of years ago, I was lucky enough to be appointed the president of Wine Market Council, which was a new organization that started a little more than 20 years ago in California, with the goal of continually monitoring consumers and members of the wine trade to provide data and information to the wine industry that would help it grow.
Right.
I did that for very nearly 20 years. And along the way, I started Wine Opinions as a way to provide that same kind of insight on consumers and the trade, not to the industry as a whole, but to independent wineries or wine companies or wine marketers who were more concerned with what their brands are doing in the market than the wine market as a whole. And so now Wine Opinions we've just started our 21st year.
Amazing.
We're lucky to have worked with dozens of winery companies in the United States and dozens of trade associations around the globe, all of whom, of course, have an interest in selling their wine on the U.S. market. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work for wine market researchers in the U.S.
Yeah, especially right now, I'd imagine with the challenges we're seeing in the industry. And I think that leads us to the topic of today's interview. And our three key takeaways and what we're really going to focus on are: number one, what are the biggest barriers in the wine industry for younger consumers? Number two, how can wine better appeal to younger audiences? And finally, number three, how can wineries utilize the great insights and information that you gather from your surveys into actionable next steps for their business? And all of this, of course, informed by your recent survey. So John, for starters, let's just do a top line view. Tell us about was the impetus for the survey, when did it happen, and what did you really want to accomplish with this most recent survey?
Well, at Wine Opinions, our clients always ask us to do research among wine drinkers. which is perfectly sensible. They're in the wine business, and they're looking to see whether wine drinkers like a label alternative that they've come up with better than one that they are currently employing in the market, or how they're stacking up against their competitor wineries or wine regions. But we find ourselves as an industry now in a position where over the last 2.5 years, wine sales in the U.S. have been in decline.
Right.
And the sales numbers tell us that one of the things driving that decline is a slower uptake of wine as part of the beverage alcohol mix among wine drinkers, or excuse me, among beverage alcohol drinkers under 40. So for the survey that we ran last month at Wine Opinions, we did not use the Wine Opinions national panel of US wine consumers because they're already US wine consumers. So instead, we went out and recruited a
Hmm.
panel of beverage alcohol consumers in ages 21 to 29 and 30 to 39. And
Okay.
whether or not they drink wine was immaterial, knowing that we would get some who did and some who didn't, and some who even preferred wine, and most who were more likely to be more interested in drinking beer or spirits. And so that gave us an opportunity, I think a unique opportunity, to look at an audience that is a potential new audience for the wine market, but is not there yet. And that's really what we were most interested in learning about, was who these folks are, what they like and don't like about the wines they've been exposed to, why they prefer beer and or spirits to wine, and all of those kinds of general areas where we could glean some interesting findings for our friends in the wine industry who are faced with trying to win over essentially a new generation of beverage alcohol consumers into the wine space.
Right, because essentially, I mean, here with the impetus and the objective with this survey is not to understand wine drinkers, it's to understand the people not drinking wine, right? And why they are not drinking wine. And
Yeah.
essentially, like you said, how can the industry better win them over?
Either not drinking wine, I would just interject, either not drinking wine or drinking wine, but not really being wine drinkers, if I can make that distinction. In
Yes,
other words, many of these are people who, they might have a friend who's a wine person, and whenever they go over to the friend's house, they drink wine with that friend. So they are drinking wine, but they're not what we would consider to be, wine enthusiasts or wine drinkers.
right. So that's a really good distinction. They're drinking wine occasionally, but they're not classifying themselves or really considering wine as a regular part of their consumption behavior.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes, and those people are really interesting. I mean, who we were hoping to be able to learn from.
Right. Let's just, dive into the findings a little bit by topic. So let's start with price. You found in your survey that a lot of wine drinkers in this 21 to 39-year-old age group are drinking less wine because of price. So what can you tell us about the perceived value of wine based upon the survey?
Well, actually, we asked a question of all the survey respondents very early in the survey before they really got an understanding of what the survey was about. And so we asked the simple question of those who, even at any small degree of frequency, drink beer, wine, and or spirits. And so if they were folks who drank any one of those, we asked them to rate their perception of the value for the price of beer versus wine versus spirits. And what we found was that by a significant degree, beer was considered to give the greatest value for the price, followed by spirits, with wine in third place. And so just the general value perception of, what do I get for my dollar in general among all of these ages 21 to 39 beverage alcohol consumers is that wine offers the least value. Then when we ask the more specific question that you had alluded to, we asked the people who drink wine, but their wine drinking frequency has declined over the last year or two, what were the reasons for drinking wine less often? And there, what we found was two things really. About 50% said, well, it's just that I prefer beer or spirits more than wine. But a nearly equal percent, I think it was 47%, well, the wines I like have just gotten too high in price. And so we could see clearly that there's the general value perception, value proposition of wine, which lags beer and spirits. But more specifically, nearly half of the people who are starting to drink less wine are doing so, at least in part, because they feel that their wines they're being priced out by the wines that they to get the wines that they like. And I mean, that's a problem with an easy solution, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you would think, but in a way, speaking from the other side, there's more discounting happening now than ever before in the wine
Yes.
industry. So it's interesting to hear that. But from the other side, we're seeing the value actually go down when we look at data points from SipSource and Nielsen, like average price points
Yes.
are declining based on heavy, heavy discounting that's happening. But it seems like the consumer is still perceiving the price as too high for the wines that they like to drink.
Yes, let me clarify that younger consumers under 40 are seeing that. Now, we didn't survey beverage alcohol consumers over 40. And so I can't say that, oh, this is widespread across the age group. But what I can say for sure is it's certainly prevalent among ages 21 to 29 and 30 to 39.
Right, exactly. And that's a great distinction. We're talking again about the 21 to 39-year-old drinker. So, okay, so price point's a clear issue and perceived value as especially as it relates to beer and spirits. Let's talk next about perceived health risks and the attitude around alcohol and health because obviously that's a topic that's been in the headlines quite a bit in the last couple of years. How do these concerns around health and alcohol among the 21 to 39-year-old consumer differ from previous generations, and how are these concerns impacting the wine industry?
Well, it's a great question because we've done some research broadly on wine, beer, and spirits among wine drinkers. And one of the things we find, of course, is even if we're looking at wine drinkers over, ages 40 and over, they too, like those under 40, are also beer drinkers, many of them, also spirits drinkers, many of them. And so we know that among beverage alcohol consumers of all ages, in the last 2 to 3 years, driven by data that's been released by the government and by research findings about the connection of alcohol consumption and health outcomes, that the general beverage alcohol consuming population in the US is now much more so than 5 years ago or 10 years ago, reconsidering their relationship with beverage alcohol, and many have decided to simply cut back, whether they're cutting back more on beer than wine or more on spirits than beer, and so on and so forth is another question. And we don't have the data on that. But what we do know is that among wine drinkers of all ages, beverage alcohol and personal health are increasingly important concerns. And we do have the data to demonstrate that. And that's certainly true of this group of under 40 beverage alcohol consumers. When we ask them the question about, are you concerned? Is there a point at which you're concerned about beverage alcohol consumption and health? And overwhelmingly, that resonates with this group. They are concerned and they are cutting back. And it's true of the beer drinker category and the spirits drinker category that we just recently looked at in this survey. They're drinking less beer and they're drinking spirits less often for the same reason, because
Yeah,
the reason they give is, well, just in general, we're cutting back on our beverage alcohol consumption. It affects wine, but it does affect affects beer and spirits as well.
okay, so the health attitude and the concerns around health are not specific to wine. They really are just around alcohol more broadly, including spirits and beer. So it's not like the wine industry in particular is standing out to them for any reason.
That's right. I mean, we asked beer drinkers whose beer consumption is declining, and we asked spirits drinkers whose spirits consumption is declining, what their motivations were. And really, more of the spirits drinkers and beer drinkers were saying, well, it's just general beverage alcohol cutting down for my health.
Got it.
So spirits and beer are equally or probably slightly more impacted than wine by this general attitude among those under 40 who are beverage alcohol consumers that they might do well to watch their level of consumption. So it's affecting everyone.
Totally. Absolutely. And on that note, I mean, do you think there presents an opportunity there for the 21 to 39-year-old drinker for the wine industry to, I don't want to say talk about the health attributes because we know, again, that there's a lot of legality around that, but to talk about maybe the functional lifestyle benefit of wine within the context of consuming alcohol that could maybe assuage or respond to some of these health concerns?
Sure, I think that wine drinkers are like beer drinkers and spirits drinkers in that they're always curious for a next new thing and so forth. And if we look at as an example, look at the surge on the market of ready to drink canned beverage alcohol. Whether
Right.
it's seltzers like White Claw and Truly, or whether it's canned cocktails. from Cutwater or High Noon, which is owned by Gallo, or Jack Daniels and Coke and so forth. And one of the interesting things we see in this particular study that we just concluded is that higher percentage of those who are under age 40 and drinking wine, a higher percentage of those are also drinking the ready to drink canned beverage alcohol more often than spirits or beer drinkers. And so there's a real appeal among younger wine drinkers to do that crossover into, the canned beverage alcohol. And it's convenience. And here, and again, we mentioned this. I think you brought this up. Look at price.
Right. Value.
The prices of the RTD canned alcohol beverages are very appealing.
Right.
So you've got that, you've got price, you've got convenience, you've got broad distribution. They're in every grocery store in states where grocery stores sell beverage alcohol, and so on. So, that is a real challenge, not just to wine, but to spirits. Spirits sales are taking a hit from the ready to drink canned beverage alcohol popularity, just as wine sales are.
Right. That's interesting to hear that the wine drinker is actually the most likely to drink those ready to drink. So compared to the beer and spirits drinkers within the 21 to 39-year-old age range. Did I hear that correctly, John?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just wanted to reiterate and make sure. So let's move next to another topic, gender. There was a clear gender divide within the results of your survey as well, where you saw beer as more preferential among men 30 to 39 years old, and spirits were more preferential for women and the drinkers, let's say under 30, the younger drinkers. So we see some clear divisions with spirits and beer, but what about wine? Did you see any clear gender or age differentials for the wine category from your survey?
Yes, to a certain extent. As you said, preference for beer skews to males, preference for spirits skews to females, preference for wine also skewed to females. Where wine was actually a little different than I find this is, if there's a couple of little rays of sunshine in these findings, it is that preference for wine was equally divided between ages 21 to 29 and 30 to 39.
Okay.
So that's encouraging. I think it shows that the interest is there. It's a question of how to bring more wine to the shelves where these people are shopping.
Right.
Wines that are priced and that have, taste appeal and so forth that's appropriate for those age segments.
And I would say before even taste, like we taste with our eyes first, package appeal, right? Was there any findings about package that you garnered beyond the preference, of course, for the ready to drink, but anything else that you might have garnered around package from the survey?
That's an excellent point, your point about package. And now let's just look at the RTDs that are on the market, the ready to drink canned beverage alcohol. Those stand out on the shelf, don't they?
Right.
White Claw literally just jumps out at you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, there's where someone else has done their homework and maybe we haven't.
So, John, that leads me to my next question. Based on the findings of your survey, would you say that the wine industry as a whole is facing a structural decline among these generations and one that will need to force them to recalibrate volume and expectations? Or are there things you found as a result of the survey that the wine industry can do better to appeal to these next generations?
Well, I think the latter is correct. I think there are things that the wine industry can do. But I think, first of all, let's look at the generations a little bit more closely because, there were some millennials in this survey. Let's look at it this way. The youngest millennial is 29 years old this year, going on 30. The oldest millennial is 43. If we were to ask our friends at wine.com which age group is driving the most revenue, they would, without batting an eye, say, well, it's millennials. Millennials are spending more money on wine than any other generation at wine.com.
Right.
Now, that's older millennials, okay? But it shows you that there is a process, there is a move from, younger people just entering the beverage alcohol space, trying everything and finding their way little by little by little into what they really like and what works for them. And so I think it's true today as it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. Now, can the wine industry do a better job of opening its doors and guiding that process? Yes. Let's look, for example, at how much it costs to even walk into a tasting room in many parts of California and other parts of the US. 15 years ago, every tasting room, virtually every tasting room, every winery in California had open doors. Come on in, try this, see if you like it. And oh, if you want to try the special flight of here of the, these more expensive wines, there's a tasting room fee. Okay. Well, the success that wineries had with that over the last, 15 or 20 years, in my personal opinion, and I don't have data on this because the survey did not involve, what was your experience in a winery tasting room?
Right.
So this is just my general observation of the industry is that, when I worked at Clos de Bois, the most fun that anybody ever had was in a Clos de Bois tasting room where all of the servers were themselves young adults, 21, 24, 28, 32. And more than half of the people walking in the door were that age. And it was the most casual, relaxed, here, try this atmosphere without try this. Oh, but wait, it's $8. There wasn't any of that. It was just here, try this. And I know, everything gets more expensive and people have got to run their businesses and so forth. But I also know what works. And what
Right.
works is putting 3 glasses of wine in front of someone and saying, here, try these. Tell me if there's one that you like. That's what works.
Right.
That works for 21 and 22-year-olds, just as it still does for 42 and 43-year-olds.
And so much of that just comes down to nuts and bolts and foundational trial, like just getting trial in front of people and introducing them to the product. And like you said, John, it's maybe lowering the barrier to entry to get more trial among this next generation and get them involved with the category. And I think that's a huge piece of this too. It's just we just need more straightforward trial.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good point to keep in mind.
I think your point about packaging is also very well taken. I think your point about packaging is that it is important. I mean, people do reach for something on a shelf that catches their eye, just if for no other reason than to turn it around and read the back label and either say, "Oh, gee, that sounds like it's interesting," or not. I mean, that basic, kind of consumer package marketing has not gone away. It's still very much in effect. Again, I point to look at the appearance of most of the RTD canned alcohol beverages. They're much brighter and lighter and happier than anything else on the shelf.
Totally. And I think even in a recent survey, I was looking at the package on Franzia, which we know is a brand that's been around for decades and perhaps not the most current brand in terms of the market trends. But if you look at their package on the side, it gives you all these great icons that give you like taste profile. Is it dry or sweet? Is it, what kind of flavors are in it? Lemon or citrus for, the white wines, etc. It gives you all this information very visually that for the consumer makes it easier to understand what is this wine going to taste like? And for so many bottles, especially let's say an Italian wine in particular, consumers can't even understand what the grape is when they look at the package. And that's a huge issue that we definitely need to think about addressing. And kind of leads me to my next question. What are some of the tangible, actionable steps that someone listening to this podcast, whether they work at a winery or a foreign importer or another aspect of the industry, could do to better adapt to this 21 to 39-year-old drinker based on the findings of your survey?
Well, the one thing I would say is don't give up on them because there's plenty of evidence that there is trial and interest in wine, just as there is in spirits and beer in that 21 to 29 part of the equation. And, I don't think they're that different from when millennials were in that age. And in fact, when millennials were in the 21 to 29, one of the things that was interesting about them was that males were equally interested in wine as females. We hadn't seen that in many, many years in this industry.
Right.
It seems not to be true today because there is a female skew, as we just saw in this survey, in the 21 to 29 age category. And maybe we should wonder about that and do a little more research and try to figure out why there is a statistically significant difference in the degree of engagement with wine among females in their 20s and males.
Right.
That is work that's yet to be done. But I say, don't give up on anybody because it's still, you're just as winnable in your 30s and 40s as you are in your 20s.
Yeah. And I think one thing that many studies have said about this generation, and I fall right there in the second half of it, is that there's less brand loyalty in this generation too. So like you said, there's still winnable minds out there. People aren't fully locked into any one beverage just yet. And still there's opportunity, like you said, to win them over. So that's a good hopeful note as we wind down this conversation about your survey, John. So as we wind down, we'll do our rapid fire quiz. We ask our guests 3 questions at the end of every episode. So if you can
Okay.
do your very best to answer these in just 1 or 2 sentences, please.
Sure.
Question number 1, what is your number 1 tip for mastering the U.S. wine market?
Be everywhere with great packaging.
I love it. Clear and concise. Question number 2, what is something you might have told your younger professional self about working in the wine industry in the U.S.?
I would have told my youngest professional self in his first job in the wine business, I would have only said, "You made the right decision. Keep it up."
I love that. And finally, we travel a lot in this industry, and I know you do as well, John. What is one of your favorite travel hacks?
Did you say travel hacks?
Yeah, favorite tip, advice for traveling.
Book the seats in the front of the plane.
Very good one. I don't think anyone has said that one just yet. So awesome.
Well, that's where you get the best wine service.
Of course.
Aside from the legroom is nice too, right?
That is nice too. Absolutely. All right, John, thank you again so much for joining us today on Masterclass US Wine Market and the Italian Wine Podcast. How can our listeners connect with you and follow along with everything that you're doing with Wine Opinions?
Follow us on LinkedIn. If you're a member of the wine trade, go to the Wine Opinions site and sign up to become a member of our trade panel and take surveys and learn from what we're trying to do for our clients.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you again, John. It was great to have you on today.
Thank you too, Juliana.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you've enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.